Hello, everyone, again. I am Ia Afo, the Director of Training and Development for the Arizona ACE Consortium. And welcome to part two of our series called Supporting Wellness. And in part two, I want to talk about how do we increase our windows of tolerance for stress. Now, I have to tell you, when I started to learn this information, I thought this was some of the most fascinating information that I had ever learned. I've been on a wellness journey probably since my teenage years. And as you know, I'm in my 50s and I'm a grandmother. So I have been on a wellness journey for so long. And I encountered so many different schools of thought and so many different ways of thinking about wellness and incorporating wellness into our lives. But there was something about this information that was really directed at the brain that um, really locked me in and I felt like was life changing for me. And so it's this idea that when we're talking about increasing our window of tolerance or managing stress, well, managing stress specifically, I think people think about, okay, what to do in the moment when we're encountering a difficult situation, right? So we say, okay, well, we can breathe. There's many different breathing techniques, or count to 10, or, all of these different things that really talk a lot about what happens when you're in the moment and when there's something very stressful happening in the moment and how to control yourself in that moment. But what I learned, and maybe you're like me, I don't know, but what I learned is that in the moment might be too late, right? Like often in the moment is too late. I can't trust that in the moment I'm going to be able to manage myself in the way that I want to manage myself every time. So, what I'm going to talk about today are things that we can do proactively in order to increase our windows of tolerance so that when we encounter that stressful situation, we have the capacity to stay a little bit more regulated because we've expanded our cup. I like to think of these activities as how do we expand our cup, right? If we think about, how full is our cup, and we think about the cup flowing over, right, is when we've become completely dysregulated. And as I always say, we've become completely dysregulated and we're now acting a fool, right? Is when the cup is running over. Um, and what happens if we're going through a very stressful time in our lives and we wake up with the cup half full? What if we're waking up every day on a scale of 1 to 10 and the cup is already at a 9? Well, we woke up that way. Then we have to get our kid out of bed, right? And we go through all of the things that we need to do in the morning. Well, by the time we get to school or get to work or get to wherever we have to go, we could already be overflowing the cup. So, how do we make the cup bigger? That's what today is about. How do we make the cup bigger? And this was life changing for me. So, at the top of our list, which sounds very easy, but is always most challenging for me. Um, Positive human interactions. Yep, relationships are at the top of that list. So, how do we increase our interactions with the positive people in our lives? Because the more positive um, relationships we have in our life, the more opportunity we have to activate the pleasure center of the brain, which then gives us a release of what I always like to call the feel goods, right? We have positive interactions. We go out to coffee or to lunch or to something with a friend, right? We activate the pleasure center of the brain. we walk away feeling great, right? Maybe we were sad before we had that interaction. Maybe we were depressed before we have that interaction. But by the time we have that interaction and we activate the nucleus accumbens in the brain, the pleasure center of the brain, and we have all the dopamine release and the release of the feel goods, well, now we're walking away feeling good. We're regulating. That is, in essence, making our cup bigger. So at the top of how to make our cup bigger, how to increase our window of tolerance, positive human interaction. Then comes learning new things. Every time we learn something new, we activate the pleasure center of the brain and we have a release of the feel goods. We're making our cup bigger. We're regulating the brain. Behavior consistent with values. Same thing. Sometimes, let's say, for instance, sometimes people get confused on this one or don't really know what I'm talking about, but let's think about the times that we are really on track with our eating behaviors and our movement behaviors, right? And so let's say we decided we are going to start a new routine on Monday, right? And we do great on Monday. We eat the way we want to eat and we move the way we want to on Monday. And then we do it again on Tuesday. And then we do it again on Wednesday, right? By Thursday, even if our goal is to lose weight or to be in better shape, well, by Thursday, we're not necessarily, have lost a bunch of weight or our overall health is improved. But what has improved is our mental health and probably, and our behavioral health because we have been consistent with behaviors that are in alignment with our own values, right? So before we even see great results from weight loss or from eating in the way that we want to eat or moving in the way that we want to move, we've already activated the pleasure center of the brain and had a release of the feel goods because we're behaving in alignment with our values. We have behavement in alignment with what we think is important and what we want to do. And that causes us to have a release of the feel goods and widen, broaden, open up that cup and increase our window of tolerance. We can also accomplish this by music, singing, right? When we sing to ourselves in the car, remember how great that feels? Yeah, I hope no one ever sees me. And I always think, oh, my poor granddaughter to know that her grandmother cranks up that music and listens to all kind of crazy, fun music when she's not in the car. But singing and listening to music have a profound impact on regulating our nervous system. And so we, again, singing and listening to music activates the pleasure center of the brain. And we have a release of the feel goods, and then we feel regulated, right? We start to feel safe, we feel calm. The same thing happens when we have other rhythmic sensory input. So thinking about other rhythmic sensory input can be we go out on a swing and we swing, right? We have an adult swing that we get to swing on, or a hammock that we swing on, or my personal favorite, jump rope. Jump rope is life-saving for me. So having that rhythmic sensory input also helps to regulate the brain and help us to feel pleasure and safety and neurologically regulated and balanced. And lastly, we can have a decrease in our physiological distress. So what are some of the things that we have currently going in our life that we can shift that's going to decrease our physiological distress? Are there things that we can change? Are there things that we focus on that cause us a lot of distress that really are out of our control, right? Like, do we need to, here's my language. Do we need to stay in our lane? Do we need to find ourselves some business? Sometimes if we don't have enough business, we're occupied by things that we can't control and really cause us more distress and for no reason, right? So if we think about activities that we can do proactively to increase our window of tolerance for stress, we're talking about positive human interaction. How can we get together more often with friends that make us feel good? Learning new things, having behavior consistent with our values, music and sensory, music and rhythmic sensory input, and a decrease in physiological distress. Now, what can this look like? So, when I learned about these proactive activities that would help me have more agency and take responsibility for regulating my brain and being more present, um, I figured out like how can I incorporate these things into my life because I have a pretty full schedule. I take care of my granddaughter a lot. I do a lot of things. And so how could I incorporate these things into my life? So for me, it looks like this. I identify as a tribal African woman. For me, it's very important to wake up before the sun comes up and pray and do all the things that I need to do. But so waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning every day allows me um, to be in alignment with what I feel is important as a tribal woman. So there's number one, right? Behavior consistent with values. Every time I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, it activates the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center in my brain, and I get a release of the feel goods, and it opens up, it makes that cup that could potentially run over later on in the day, it makes that cup a little bit bigger. So I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. At 5 o'clock, I go to the gym. When I get to the gym, I have friends that are there. There's great women that I work out with early in the morning, and we have a great time. We're laughing, we have relationships. So, since relationships are really hard for me, that ensures that I get that piece in every day because I'm having that interaction with the women at the gym. And so if I don't have any other opportunity to have positive human interaction, I've had it at 5 o'clock in the morning, right, with my friends at the gym. But also while I'm at the gym, I box and kickbox and we listen to music. So there's music input that's going to help to activate the pleasure center of the brain. We are hitting the punching bags. I incorporate a jump rope, so then that adds the rhythmic sensory input as well. So far, right? 4 a.m. I wake up. That allows me to have behavior that's consistent with my values. 5 o'clock, I get to the gym. I'm having positive interactions with other humans. I'm listening and singing to music. I am having rhythmic sensory input by the type of workout that I'm doing and by adding jump rope, hitting the heavy bags, and all that kind of stuff. And then on my ride home, I listen to it's probably like a 12-minute ride home. And I listen to one of my nerdy, neurology podcasts, and I get to learn something new. So even it's a smidget of time, right? It's not some big thing. I haven't read a whole book or done any of those things, but I've learned some new piece of information. And each one of those things activates the pleasure center of my brain, allows me to have a release of the feel goods. And once I have that release, I am widening the cup. So perhaps it doesn't run over later by the time 10 people get on my nerves. And I am regulating my brain. And the more I continue these behaviors, right, the more regulated I am moving around in the world, and the more I can manage the stressors of everyday life. So I'll give you that list again of proactive activities that we can include into our day-to-day lives. And that would be positive relationships, learning new things, behavior that's consistent with our values, music, sensory input, rhythmic sensory input, and a decrease in our physiological distress. So I invite you to think about how you may incorporate some of those things into your life so that you too can increase that window of tolerance for stress and make that cup a little bit bigger so that it doesn't run over later in the day. Thank you so much for listening. I look forward to seeing you all again when we do part 3 of our Supporting Wellness series. Thanks so much. Take good care. Bye bye.